Hi, Sophie.
Hello, Anand.
Today my guest is Sophie Parragh. She's a full professor at the Johannes Kepler University Linz in Austria, where she's a head of the Institute of Production and Logistics Management, member of the Dean team of the Business School, and director of the Master's Program in Economic and Business Analytics. Sophie has been involved in several applied and fundamental research projects in healthcare, field staff routing and scheduling, and multi-objective combinatorial optimization. She published many papers in international journals, and she serves as associate editor for Informed Journal Computing and for OR Spectrum. Sophie, thank you very much for being here. Danke. How are you?
Thank you, I'm fine. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
My pleasure too.
So to start, from which part of Austria are you from?
So originally I'm from Salzburg, so I grew up in this beautiful, comparably small city where Mozart was also born, and I had a really nice childhood in Salzburg.
Really? Any particular memories from that period? Childhood and teenage years?
I think I grew up, I was a very happy kid, I think. When I was 6, we moved to a house and we later even had a swimming pool, not a very large one, but we had one, and we spent our summers in the garden. I have very nice memories playing with my a bit older cousin in the garden. We had all kinds of, I think we spent the entire summer in the garden and we played, I don't know, detectives or lost children in the forest, whatever. But it was, I really have very good memories of this time when we were all, I have 2 younger siblings and my cousin is like a third sibling to me. And so we were the 4 of us and we really had like perfect summers outside. This was really great. This was a very great time.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. You seem to like math in school, correct?
Yes, I really liked math at school, but when my teacher told me that maybe I should consider studying math, I thought, well, I'm not sure if this is a good choice because I did not see myself in his position at the school. So I was kind of not thinking of becoming a school teacher. And in my view of the world, this was the only thing you can do if you study math. And that was one of the reasons why I did not decide to study math. But I was kind of lost. I really didn't know what to do when I ended school. I was 18 years old. I had just finished my Matura, as it's called in Austria. This is when you could start to study, but I really had no clue what to study because I thought that, well, math is not the best choice. And and then my parents were really nice. They supported me in going abroad because I also loved to travel, and my parents also liked to travel a lot, and we also traveled quite a bit when I was still a kid. And I think this love for traveling was started very early on. And so when my parents told me that I could, if I wanted to, I could spend like some time abroad before starting to study to kind of find out what I want to do, I was really happy. And this was when I left for the United States for 8 months after school. I spent 8 months in San Diego at a language school. So my parents allowed me this year to find myself more or less, and I found a whole bunch of new friends. I think this was the time when I really grew up. We bought a car together with new friends in order to be able to be mobile, because the school was at the campus university that was a bit outside of San Diego. So we needed a car. So the first thing you had to do was to buy a car. An experience, I would say. And then I think it was a really, really great time.
Yeah.
But
go ahead.
Yeah, but unfortunately, when I came back, I still didn't know what to study. It was not very helpful. I think I discovered the world, but I was not really sure what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a new program in Vienna that was International Business Administration. And it was even my mom who told me, well, you like to travel so much, you like to go abroad. So maybe this is a good choice because you can go abroad. And I thought, well, yeah, that's true. I like to travel. I'd like to spend some more time abroad. And that's when I started in Vienna, International Business Administration, and my parents were generous enough to support me also to go to Vienna and be able to study there.
Okay, so let's see if I got it. You lived in Salzburg until you joined the university, and prior to that, you went to the U.S. I've been to San Diego actually when I was a kid in 1993. I remember the zoo, the famous San Diego Zoo, and yeah, that's very nice. I even bought a snake, not an actual snake, but to scare people, I just tried to put in random places on the floor, kid stuff. So, any other memories from the U.S.?
Yeah, I think the most important part in the US was really to be the first time, like really on my own. I traveled there all by myself. So this was really the first time that I went somewhere where I didn't know anyone. And I had to like really grow up and take care of everything myself. And I think this was the important part, but it was also like meeting people from all over the world. I mean, I met people from France, from South America, from very many different countries, and this was really an enriching experience. And one of my closest friends in San Diego was from France, from Toulouse actually, and we are still in touch. She came here when I got married, so we are still friends, although it's the older we get, the harder it is, and with Corona it's not helping, so we don't see each other a lot anymore, but we are still in touch. So this is a very long friendship already.
Nice. Was that your first international experience?
Not entirely. I also spent a few weeks in Hastings when I was at school for an English class. I think this is the classic thing you do when you're in Europe. But it was my first longer period abroad. Yeah.
Right. And then you said that you came back and joined the university, and the criterion was basically something that allowed you to have something international in the related to the degree that you picked.
Yes, of course. And so that was also my first goal, to actually go abroad again. And with this study, you could do this as early as after 2 years. So I applied after 1 year to go abroad, and I used the Erasmus program. And at that time, I don't know if it's still imaginable, it was really difficult to get a place, because what I see today is that there are empty places. We have to push students to take the Erasmus places. And at that time, there was a huge competition for these places. So you really had to have good grades and to have to apply. And then you had to be lucky to get the place you wanted and stuff. So there was a big, it was really big to go abroad and to be able to go abroad. Mm-hmm. And in my case, I had applied for a place within the International Business program, but I also applied within the informatics program, because my friend from the United States, she lived in Toulouse, and the informatics people, they had a place, an Erasmus place in Toulouse, and my faculty did not have one. And so I asked for this place, and they told me, yes, I can have it. But of course, I would also have to follow courses there that were not really related to my curriculum in Austria. But I decided, well, I really want to go to Toulouse, so why not? I will try to do the courses there. And that was, so I went to Toulouse, and I was at the at University Paul Sabatier in Toulouse, and this is where you have all the natural science, the STEM stuff, not the business stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was in a program, so I was in an informatics program, and there I had to learn how to program. We even had to implement a small kernel. We had to learn how to program, and the programming language that they taught was C. But imagine I had to learn C in French, not in English, not in German, but in French. So the entire program was in French. So I still have some things that I probably pronounce wrong, because I still have this French pronunciation for that in my head. But I had to learn how to program C, and I managed to do that. Before that, I was never interested in programming, and it was always my brother who could do all these things, and I was never touching these things. But actually, it was not that uninteresting, and I was even, one of the teachers even told me, well, you were the only one who got this pointer exercise right. So I was really proud. Yeah, and that's how I learned how to program.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Actually, you learn how to code motivated by a friendship in the end.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
What a ton of events. That's
Yes.
interesting, right? You had all this idea of leaving Austria again and spending some time abroad, but then you had this connection with your friend that you met in the US, and the result was not only the international experience, but also you made use of that to acquire a sort of a specific knowledge that ended up helping you throughout your career, right?
Yes, that's true. So this was kind of the base of my career, I would say, because when I returned to Austria, it was time. So in the second part of the study program, you had to choose specializations, and there was one specialization in operations research. And since I really liked math a lot, and I was not so happy with many of the other courses, I thought, well, this is what I would like to do and what I will do, because this was kind of my path back to mathematics in a way, or more math. And so I chose operations research, and the coordinator at that time, I think, was Walter Gutjahr, who was also then later on my thesis advisor. But I had to choose a second specialization. And in the beginning, I was not sure what to choose, but then I found out that also the logistics specialization is very closely linked to operations research. There were even courses that had the title Operations Research for, or Operations Research Methods for Logistics, something like that. So I decided that this is probably a good choice. And this was when I first was in touch actually with the chair of Richard Hartl. And at this chair, there was also Karl Dörner working. But I never followed a course by him. All the courses were taught by other people. So I only really met him later.
Right. So no contact with OR whatsoever before that specialization? Or did you take any introductory class during the first years of your university degree?
Well, not really. So we had mathematics and statistics as mandatory subjects, but we didn't really have a class in OR. But I recall that in mathematics, we had linear programming. So we learned the simplex method in mathematics at that time. But I think that was about it. I think there was not much more OR than that. Maybe a bit but we had logistics, so production logistics courses, and there you also have a bit of algorithmic stuff that has its roots in OR, but not like a dedicated OR class that was mandatory for everyone was not there.
Okay. What about the logistics specialization? Was mostly management or did you have the chance to apply any OR or mathematical approaches?
So since it was organized by Richard Hartl, you can probably imagine that it was not only management, it was very mathematically oriented with modeling and algorithms. And so it was the algorithmic and mathematical side of logistics, and that's also why I really enjoyed it. So this was a good choice, I think. But my main motivation at that time was not to work in the logistics field, but I was really interested in operations research in the beginning. And as I already told you, I met Walter Gutjahr. Walter Gutjahr was one of my teachers, and he was a professor in operations research. And in one of his classes, so as you can imagine, it was a business group. So the group of people in the specialization of operations research was comparably small, so it was never hard to get a place there. In the other courses, sometimes it was not possible to get a place, but in this area, it was not so hard to get a place. And at some point, Walter Gutjahr approached me and asked me if I wanted to become a tutor for two of his classes. One of them was some software tools in operations research, which was at that time really easy because I had learned programming or coding before. So the others had more difficulties than I did because I had this new background knowledge already. And the other one was discrete mathematics and graph theory, and actually this was not part of my curriculum, so I was in the beginning not sure if I should say yes, but since I thought, well, if he tells me that I can do it, I assume I can do it, so let's try. and I became a tutor of a class I never took myself before. So I had to work quite a bit in order to become a tutor of a class
Right,
I
yeah.
never followed before. But I learned a lot of interesting things, and it gave me additional knowledge in an area where I did not have that much knowledge yet.
Yeah, amazing.
And
yeah. Do you think that if you hadn't gone to France, would you have picked up the OR specialization?
I think I would have picked up operations research, but I'm not sure if it would have been that easy, because this knowledge of how to code and some basic algorithm stuff was really something that helped me a lot and made a lot of things a lot easier to understand and to follow and to do. So I don't know if I'm not sure, but probably it had a major impact on the fact that I found all these things not too hard to do.
Yeah.
Probably this was my year in France. Yeah, then when he asked me if I wanted to become a tutor, I also asked him, I'm also looking for an advisor for my what we call diploma thesis. I think you would call it dissertation something, or master thesis today. And I asked him if he wanted to become my advisor and if he had some suggestion for a topic. And then he gave me 2 topics. One of them was in game theory. And to be honest, I'm really fascinated by game theory. I think this is a very interesting area. But I was a bit scared by the topic because I thought I have much less knowledge in game theory than I have in algorithms. And so the other topic was stochastic biobjective location problem to be solved by genetic algorithm. And I thought, well, this is something that I feel I can do better, or where I have more background knowledge. And so I asked, do you think I can use C in order to do the genetic algorithm? And he said, yeah, of course, you should. If you know C, that's a good idea, you can do that. And actually, I then started on a code that was available online for the NSGA2, which is one of the genetic algorithms in bi- and multi-objective optimization, which is probably a very famous algorithm. And I integrated everything that was necessary in order to solve the problem I was dealing with in my diploma master thesis. Right. And it was great. I really liked it. I never thought I would end up sitting in front of a computer and coding all the time, and I would enjoy this that much, but I really did. And so when I was finally done with my work and I submitted a first version of my thesis, I got feedback immediately. I'm still really impressed by the fact that the feedback came so early, because when I look at myself now, I'm not always able to return to students that quickly. So this is something I'm aiming for, but it's not always possible. And then it was done. Like, there were a few comments, and then I had finished my degree, and I went to see Walter Gutjahr and I asked him, well, I really enjoyed this. Is there a possibility to continue working on similar things? And he told me, well, yes, I have heard that Karl Dörner has a new project and he's looking for somebody. I should drop him an email or write an email to him. And that's what I did. And then I think I started. He told me to come and meet him, and he told me about the project a little bit, and then I think I started just a week later or something. So there was not a lot of delay. And the project was on dial-a-rite problems. And at that time I had no background in vehicle routing at all. So it was my first contact to vehicle routing. And in this case, dial-a-rite.
Before we continue with that, just to clarify, you graduated before the Bologna Agreement, right? Or we started the course before the university degree before that, right? So it was 4 to 5 years because you went to France period? Yeah,
so the minimum, so we always, in Austria, we call it the minimum study duration, something like that. It was 4 years. But many people needed more. I needed almost 5, I think, because I spent a year abroad, so 2 semesters abroad, where I studied more informatics than business. And I was, and I also took some time to explore a bit other subjects, which was more easily possible at that time, I think, than before. I think universities are much more like schools today than they used to be. So there was a lot more freedom in going to lectures or not going to lectures and choosing subjects. But I needed 5 years to complete my studies, and then I started the doctorate studies at that time. Yeah.
So it was a natural choice for you to do PhD because you fell in love with what you were doing and you wanted to keep on doing more. Did you remember having any opinions from your parents when you decided to follow that path?
I think they were really proud. So I don't know. I recall my mom saying, "Yeah, Dad was anticipating this, that he would like this a lot to work at university." So probably they know me better than I do.
Right.
But really, it was a very It was I was not doing the PhD for the PhD degree or for the doctorate degree. It was just because I enjoyed working on these things and I was looking for a possibility to continue working on that. So this is also something that I think needs to be there. So you should not do a PhD because you want to have the degree. You should do a PhD because you love to do research. I think this is a really important prerequisite for a successful PhD because you are spending the next years with the topic you're working on, and probably you know that as well.
Yeah.
And it has to be a topic you like and you feel like you want to know everything about. Otherwise you will not succeed.
So now you were with VRP and DARP. I know that first time I heard your name was through that famous survey of yours, parts 1 and 2, on those pickup and delivery problems. It was somewhere 2007, 2008. And tell me how hard it was to do that, because it was a massive amount of work.
Yeah, it was really a massive amount of work. So I can tell you this story. So Richard Hartl was invited to write a survey for this journal. And his idea was, well, we could do it on pickup and delivery because we are working on this now, so it would be a good thing to do that. And apparently there's a lack of a survey of this kind. And when we discovered how large the field of pickup and delivery is, if you include all the backhaul stuff, the simultaneous pickup and delivery, not only the paired pickup and delivery problem, but the direct problem is also belonging to, then you have a huge amount of literature to cover. And this was also the time when we asked the editor of the journal if it's also possible to have 2 papers, because we don't think we will be able to put this into one. And so there was this, so we made the separation, we divided it into 2 parts. So the first one was where we had the transport between pickup and delivery locations and the depots, and not between pickup and delivery locations. And the second part was then the one where we had also the transport between pickup and delivery locations. This was our division. It was a lot of work, but it was also nice because I got a really, really good overview of the entire field. I got to know what has been done in all these different areas, and I could then use this knowledge in order to build upon. And this was really, I think, a good start, but it was a lot of work.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the VRP with simultaneous pickup and delivery. I worked quite a lot in that. It was my master's topic and then part of my PhD. We did some heuristic stuff and exact stuff for that. But I remember that the first time I got to know the DARP was also during the master's, and I was always a bit scared or concerned about that maximum write time constraint, that I know that would kind of mess up a lot, and I postponed it at least for 15 years or so, I think a little bit less, to really visit the DARP and start working seriously on that type of problems, with pickup and delivery and maximum write time constraints. And then I suppose when you started studying the methodological part and thinking about solutions for that problem, it should have been challenging for you, right?
Yes, it was challenging. So the first paper I was given to work on was the taboo search paper by Jean-François Cordeau and Sylvia Laporte. And my first task was to re-implement the taboo search in order to get to know the problem and to understand how the feasibility check works, which, as you already said, with the write time constraint is a bit intricate. And I needed some time in order to make this work. So this was really some work in the beginning. But at some point I had figured it out and I could really work on it. And then, at the chair of Richard Hartl and Karl Dörner, the focus was mainly on meta-heuristic solution approaches. But if you look at my dissertation, I also worked on exact methods, because at some point I discovered this field and I found it even more interesting than the meta-heuristics field, I have to confess, maybe. And it was transportation logistics class where JJ Salazar was invited to give this class, and he taught it together with Karl Dörner. So he did the heuristic part and JJ did the exact part. And this was my first real, connection to vehicle routing and also a bit the exact world. And then there was also Manuel Jori visiting Vienna. And he told me about this new approach where there was the branch and cut algorithm by Jean-François Cordeau, and they were working then with Stefan Röpke on the more advanced version of a branch and cut, and then also on a branch and price algorithm. And Manuel Jori indicated to me that this work existed, and then I started to work on it, and I also re-implemented the branch and cut, the two index-based version, to learn how to do branch and cut. This was also our first steps with Cplex and Cplex callbacks and callbacks in C and C++.
How did you learn that?
By myself. I had a bit of help by one of my colleagues who was also experiencing with Cplex, and we all together worked on things and tried to explore how it worked. So in the beginning I used this macro thing, and then I found out that if you derive a class for the callback, then you can even do more stuff. And so it evolved over time. But it was quite some work, but it was also, I really learned a lot by trying to really implement things I had found and then adapting them to my version of the data right problem, and trying to make sure that all these inequalities also hold for my more complex heterogeneous data right problem, because the entire project was actually motivated by the Austrian Red Cross. They had a problem that they told us about, and there was more like, we have this heterogeneous fleet of vehicles where you do not just fit in 6 persons, but you have different modes of transport, and all these needed to be integrated into the algorithms, and this was quite some work.
Yeah, so it's interesting to know that you had the influence of JJ and Manu Jori. They were both here actually as guests. They're lovely people. I like them very much, and I think that shows that you have to connect, right, during the PhD, and sometimes it's the environment that you are. It can be great, but not enough, and especially to learn advanced stuff and the latest algorithms and models, you should really interact with people from other institutions, right? So.
Yeah, I also think so. And I think it's also today even more, maybe it's become more and more important really to know about the research that is done before the papers are published. Because my impression is a bit that when the paper is out, the research is already not really new anymore. Because, I mean, this has been presented at a conference, then there has been a technical report, and until you have the entire cycle of reviewing behind, then the paper, that what you publish is at least, I don't know, an idea that is a few years old. And I think one of the important things is also to really be connected in the way that you know of the things that are happening now, and not of the things that are published now. So this is also something that I find important, and that's also why it's important, I think, to travel to conferences, which I did not do as much as I maybe used to because of my children, and now of course the Corona situation. But as a PhD student, I think it's really important to attend conferences and to connect and to hear about the ongoing research at the different.
Yeah. Talking about that, when was the first time that you presented the work?
That I presented the work was at the International Meteoristics Conference, MIC. But the first conference I attended was before that. Karl Dörner and Richard Hartl took me to the Route 2007 on Jekyll Island. That was organized by Martin Savusberg at that time. And this was my very first conference I ever attended.
And Route was already the first.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this was, I did not present anything. Kyle presented the work we did together.
Uh-huh.
And it was like, I had read all those papers for my survey, and now all the people, the famous authors, they were all sitting in the same room, and I was like, wow.
I had the very same experience in 2011. Exactly. I understand perfectly what the experience you had. It's surreal, right?
Yeah.
But you mentioned that the first time you presented was at the Mathematics International Conference, MIC. Were you nervous, or it all went very smooth?
Oh, I was very nervous, of course. I'm still nervous before giving a talk, but it gets better. I mean, I'm not very nervous, but it's always a bit, I don't know, you don't have that you feel the excitement of like being in front of an audience. Even when I teach, it's that there are a few seconds before I start to talk where I have this feeling of, I don't know, a bit of nervousness, a bit of stress, but then it's fine. I was stressed, and I this was the first time I was supposed to give a talk in front of an audience that would know a lot about the area I'm working in, and maybe they would ask difficult questions or whatever, so I didn't know. And I think I rehearsed my talk, I don't know, at least 10 times before I gave it, to make sure that I was able to give it in a good way. And I recall I was in the session that was devoted to bi- and multi-objective problems, because this was a presentation on the multi-objective Dalawalte problem. Oh. And I recall that the session chair, I think it was Jacques Tegem at that time, I told him that I was a bit nervous because it was my first talk, and he introduced me, and this is Sophie, and this is her first talk at the conference. And I was like, okay. So
you're right.
This was my first talk.
So I know you had the survey papers, parts 1 and 2, and what were the next papers you got from the PhD thesis?
Okay, then there's a networks paper that was a special issue from the ROUT conference. That was the multi-objective Dalawalte problem, where we added the objective function of service quality in a way. And then I continued to work on the branch and cut part, and the branch, it was not branch and cut, it was column generation for an enhanced version, where we also had some attendants that would accompany people on the vehicle. And this was work that I did partially in Montreal. So I visited Jean-François Cordeau in Montreal for a bit less than 3 months. And I worked on this there in collaboration with him. And it was really nice to work there, because at some point I had this issue that I was pricing, and I would generate the same route over and over again. Probably I know. If you implement a pricing algorithm, you have experienced the same thing. And then Jean-François told me, probably you have to use a larger zero or epsilon, because you are not, I mean, there's this tolerance in floating point numbers that it's just not clear where to cut off. So I learned about these precision issues, and they accompany me in a way, because you have these precision issues at very many places.
Right. And numerical algorithms in general, you have to take care of that, right?
And
when you talk about
that until today.
When even sometimes you went to check if the cut is violated or not, you have to be careful about that. And if you go to global optimization, there are a lot of things related to precision. So it can be something that you don't actually get in textbooks or even classrooms, but that sometimes require the experience of somebody that already went through that process. So you were telling about multi-objective optimization paper, and then did you have another one?
Yes, then we also published the variable neighborhood search for the single objective version that is in C&OR, so Computers and Operations Research. And then I have one operations research spectrum, that's what I wanted to say. A spectrum paper that is together with Jean-François Cordeau and also Richard Hartling Caldörner on the version where we have also the additional attendant on board of the vehicle that is required in order to take care of the patients. But we included this aspect into the neighborhood search, and we developed based on the branch and price that was available, we adapted it to this new version, the column generation part, so we could have at least lower bounds to compare to. And then later on, I also have a paper in Transpiration Research C, where I have the branch and cut for the Dollarite problem with heterogeneous fleet. This was something that first I thought could not be published and would only be part of my dissertation or my thesis, because it was for me the first step towards the next version. But in the next version we had this attendance stuff included, so and the column generation part. So in the end they told me, why not try to publish this as well? It's a separate work, it's an entire chapter, so go ahead and try it. And they also told me I should try to publish it only under my name, because I have been mainly working on this. And I think for later on it's really important to have also one single author paper at some point. It helps I think it helps later on, because people see that you can really do also research on your own. And I think in the German-speaking world, this is something that people look at more and more, that you can show that you're not only working well in a team, but that you can really show what you do yourself as well.
Right.
Show
independence.
This has helped me. Show independence from your supervisors. I think this is
excellent.
Something that helps.
You got a lot of papers from a PhD. That's remarkable. You stayed in Vienna after completing a PhD, right?
Yes. So I completed my PhD in 2009. And then Caldörner had an applied research project in the service technician routing and scheduling area. And I was working with one of my master thesis students on this problem with Attila Kovac. And we also have a paper on this topic that I was working on in my postdoc phase. And it became clear that I could not stay at the University of Vienna for very much longer, because we have this maximum duration of around 6 years that you can spend in a row at the same university. And the recommendation was, and I think still is, if you want to stay in academia, then you should go out for a postdoc phase. And so I was looking for postdoc positions abroad. And I really liked California, but I missed on learning how to surf there. So I was looking for locations that are close to the beach. We can maybe also even learn surfing at some point. And then there was this, a really nice, so if I could choose another place to live, I think I would try to live somewhere close to the sea or to the ocean. I really love the ocean.
I know.
And I love the ocean more than the sea.
Really? Yeah. I live 200 meters from the Atlantic Ocean.
I'm a bit jealous.
So you went to Portugal.
Yes, I went to Portugal. So it was nice, because there was a postdoc position advertised in Porto, and one of the advisors was Bernardo Almada Lobo, and it was on a routing problem that was related to Dollarite. So I thought, well, I've been working on Dollarite stuff, so I can apply. Probably this would be a good fit. And in fact, they immediately returned to me and asked me if I wanted to come. And then I had 6 weeks or something, maybe a bit more, to inform my partner that I wanted to go to Portugal and to organize things to move there. And then in January, I arrived in Portugal.
Yeah, how is your Portuguese?
And it was much better than it is today. I started to learn Portuguese there, and I was able to do some very basic conversational stuff, but it's been 10 years now and I have not been using it. So it's lost between my Italian and my Spanish basic knowledge.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I can imagine. But you eventually went back to Vienna after.
Yes, I went back to Vienna because I had applied for a research grant that was supporting young female researchers on their way to habilitation, and I won this grant. And it's more or less you should try not to delay the start of these projects too much. And also family-wise, it was easier not to stay 1 year abroad, but to reduce the time abroad a bit and to return earlier on this grant. So I returned in summer. Mm-hmm. And started to work on this grant. This was a grant for 3 years that would finance my position, and I had quite a bit of a travel budget with it. And it's awarded by the Austrian Science Fund, and it probably gave me the opportunity to continue working in academia and also to work again at the University of Vienna, mm-hmm. and to continue collaborations with the people there, like also with Fabienne Tricoire, for example, who was also there.
Mm-hmm. You became a mom at that time?
Yes, also that, yes. My son was born in 2012, and then I went on maternity leave for, in Austria you leave 2 months before the delivery, the forecast delivery date. Mm-hmm. And then you have to at least stay 2 months afterwards. But here it's more common that you stay at least a year with the kid at home, and that then the dad takes care of the kid also for a few months, and then the children go to daycare. Mm-hmm. And I was, so the split with my partner was that I was planning to stay at home for 10 months, and he would take longer than many other fathers do stay at home also with our son until he would start at the kindergarten. Mm-hmm. So at I think with 14 months, so he would do 4 or 5 months in total. And just when I wanted to return to my grant and to continue working or restarting to work, actually, I got a phone call from one of my colleagues at the Vienna University of Economics and Business, that she was going to go on maternity leave, and she was a professor, so it was Tina Kolbinger, and she asked me if I was interested in replacing her during the time when she was on maternity leave. And career-wise, this is probably something you should not decline if you're offered to replace a full professor for a while. Uh-huh. So I decided, I'm going to be able to organize that, and we said, okay, let's try. We'll find a way. So I was replacing her, especially in the teaching, and the teaching load of full professors in Austria is twice the load of postdocs. So it's not only 4 hours per week of teaching, but 8. Mm-hmm. So I had to set up the new courses and was really busy preparing deep teaching in the master program there and also in the bachelor's program. And I spent 7 months there at the mm-hmm. WU Vienna, mm-hmm. as it's called in Austria. Mm-hmm. And only then I returned to my postdoc grant. Mm.
And then
this also meant...
go ahead, please.
I had not that much time for research during the time when I was filling the full professor position for a while.
Yeah, that was my question, by the way. So that's when you also organized one workshop, right? Or a conference in multi-objective optimization and some recent trends, something like that?
Yeah, that's when I returned to the University of Vienna, there was also Ivana Ljubic working there. And besides my research grant, I also had another funded research project together with Karl Dörner and Fabienne Tricoire on multi-objective optimization. At that time, it was supposed to be on math heuristics for multi-objective optimization. But we discovered during our work in this area, that there's very little work on exact methods for bi and multi-objective optimization, and so we started a reading group. There were a few papers popping up at this time, and we tried to keep track of these papers and read them and discuss them together. And there was also Marco Sinel, part of this reading group, who is now in my team at the Johannes Kepler University also. And then we had the idea, actually the idea was initiated by Walter Gutjahr. He said, when you have these projects, it's nice to have some kind of a workshop in the end to present the findings, maybe invite a few people, international researchers, and have a small event. And Ivana also had a project, and so we decided to set up these events together. And so we set up the first workshop on recent advances in multi-objective optimization. And we invited at that time Xavier Garnier-Bleu and Matthias Ergot as keynote speakers, and they agreed to come. And we invited a few other people for giving talks on various topics in the domain. And the workshop was a success. It was really nice. It was a lot of work, but it was really nice. And the nicer thing about it, what I'm really proud of, is that it has continued ever since. So we initiated a workshop series that now takes place every year at a different place, so far only in Europe, but maybe we'll move somewhere else at some point. And it's going to take place this year as well. Last year it was supposed to return to Austria, but unfortunately it was not really taking place in Austria. It was taking place online. And also this edition will take place online, but maybe next year there will be presence workshop again.
Yeah, since you're talking about multi-objective optimization, I wonder, what are your views on the current state of heuristics for multi-objective combinatorial optimization?
I think there is a whole bunch of methods out there, and there are some which are really good, and some that have very interesting names. But for example, Fabien has been working on this multi-directional local search, and this is something that really works well because it has the local search component, which is really for combinatorial optimization. I think this is something you need in order to have good results. And I also think that most genetic algorithm-based works, if they are for combinatorial optimization, you need a local search part. So just having mutation and crossover is not enough. You need something that really addresses the problem structure itself in order to have really good results. And any combination makes sense.
I work with some Pareto local search idea that was introduced to me by a very good friend of mine, Thibaut Lust. He's a Belgian guy. He's in France. And I also, when I started studying multi-objective optimization problems, I'm not an expert like you, but I realized that comparing methods could be tricky, right?
Yeah, so there are a lot of these indicators available, like the hypervolume indicator is probably the most prominent one, and there are these epsilon indicators, multiplicative version, for example. I think the hypervolume indicator has some value because it is kind of a combination of many different things to strive for in multi-objective optimization. You would like to have a good representation in terms of the entire frontier should be covered, and also you want to have, if you're in an immunization context, you want to be as close as possible to the optimal frontier, and this means you want to push down your solutions. But it's not straightforward, and I think the community thinks also that if you have different indicators and they do not all say the same thing, like this method is better than the other, then it's not so clear which method is better. And it's also not so clear what is the best method. Is it the one that has a few points or a few solutions on the greater frontier, or one that has many but is further away? So this is not so clear, I would say. It's not so easy to compare.
Yeah, and unfortunately, many people take advantage of that to, as you said, publish work with very creative names based on all sorts of creatures. And I understand that. And what about the gap between theory and practice regarding multi-objective combinatorial optimization problems?
So I think there's a need for multi-objective optimization in the sense that it's also that people in industry usually, when they face an optimization problem, there's usually not only one goal they aim for. So sometimes it can be really hard for them to define the one and only objective. And you see also many papers that are more on the application side that have these many terms in the objective function. But it's sometimes really hard to make them comparable in a way that you put weights such that they are represented in the correct way. If the objectives are lexicographic, I think it's easy. You can just put a lot of weight on the main objective, then have the second objective. But as soon as they're not really lexicographic anymore, it's not so easy. I mean, there's a whole bunch of research on how to elucidate preferences and to guide the decision maker towards the right area, let's say, on the Pareto frontier. But I'm still thinking that it's also valuable to produce the entire frontier and not to produce to approximate it, but in the best case to really know what is the optimal frontier. And for that, I think it's really helpful because very often see this picture that you have a service quality or some ecological goal that you want to achieve, and you have the cost objective, which is the dominant objective in our field, I would say.
Yeah.
And what you see is that even that when you plot the Pareto frontier, you see that you can increase quite a bit on the other objective with only very little additional costs. And you don't see that if you just put some threshold value or a constraint on that, because then you get one solution and you have to live with this solution. But I think decision makers are actually interested in more solutions, and I think this is also the reason why Cplex has this populate function, that you can return more solutions to discuss and not only one. And in multi-objective optimization, you always have more solutions to discuss. Of course, you don't need a million solutions. It's helpful to have a few, but if you can check what the structural differences are, as a decision maker, you can make a much more informed decision as opposed to having this one solution and this is the one you should now implement, but there's nothing around.
But from your experience, do you see practitioners, for example, in the industry, running the algorithms and analyzing the frontier in practice, or is something that is more academical in the right now?
So I think for strategic decisions they do. So we have been collaborating with a company here close to Linz in the retail business, and they really wanted to evaluate several goals and see the trade-offs. So we really wanted to see this plotted to understand from a strategic perspective, is it better to invest in enlarging the warehouse as opposed to enlarging the fleet, for example? What is the trade-off? And you can of course put all these into costs, but if you cannot really, if you do not really know exactly what the costs are, it's also a bit delicate to just put terms and then get one solution. It's nice to see what the structural differences are that you get. And we had a very nice masterpieces project where we actually did that. And with Fabien, we also have a paper in Transportation Research B where we analyze the trade-off between like facility and fleet investment as opposed to CO2 emissions of the fleet. And also in this context, this was actually then used in an applied research project to elucidate the trade-off relationship for the decision makers. So this was put into a software tool where the decision maker could click on a solution and look at the solution on the frontier. So
wow, that's great. That's great. Yeah, very. I'm very glad to hear that. But at some point you joined the university in Linz, and can you tell me how was the process?
Yeah, of course. So this is also a nice story, or maybe for me it was a bit stressful, I would say. So the position was advertised, and for me it was at some point clear that if I wanted to stay in academia, the only unlimited position would be a full professor position, because for me these new positions that are now popping up, I'm a bit too old for that already. I mean, I'm too far from my PhD degree to apply for these tenure positions. And there was this position in Linz advertised, and I recall exactly that there was this, I think it was the 19th of September, where I was supposed to submit my application to Linz, and on the application it said you should have a habilitation, but I did not have a habilitation at that time. Because I was like thinking that we would move to a system where habilitations are not necessary anymore. It's just research achievements, and if you fulfill these achievements, you would be considered equally equal to somebody with a habilitation. But in Austria, the system is still that if you want to advise PhD students, usually you should have a habilitation. Otherwise, you're not really allowed. There are some exceptions, but it's not so easy to be a PhD advisor if you do not have a habilitation. So in order to reach the 19th of September goal, I had to submit my habilitation, because then I could write on the application letter, I have submitted my habilitation. I will have a habilitation soon.
Yeah.
So the goal for the 19th of September was not only to submit the application, but also to submit a habilitation. And I wanted to have a backup plan, so also applied for large research grants. At the same time, also the deadline was the 19th of September. So on this day, I was rushing between submitting the research proposal at the Austrian Science Fund, submitting the application for the full professor position, and submitting my habilitation to be able to write my application that I have submitted my habilitation.
Wow, quite a drama.
It was a crazy day.
Yeah.
And of course, I could not finish anything before this date. It was all getting ready on that day. That was the story.
Yeah.
But
they asked you for an interview or something then?
Yes, for a very long time I didn't hear anything. But in the Austrian system, it's also like that there's the jury is meeting, and then they look at all the applications. They decide which of the applications are forwarded to reviewers, and those then look at the applications and they recommend who to invite for an interview. And I think in April I defended my habilitation. I still had not heard anything, so I was thinking, well, I submitted this application, but nothing is going to happen, or they ended the process or something. But then I got an invitation, and at that time I was pregnant with my daughter.
Oh.
and the date for the hearing was like, I think 4 weeks before the planned delivery.
Wow.
So I was, okay, this puts me into a situation I never wanted to be. I thought I never ever wanted to go to a hearing with, I don't know, with a big belly, like more thinking about the baby than about research.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I was already on maternity leave, so I also had a bit more time than usually, because I didn't have to teach anymore. So I could prepare my hearing well, and I really took a lot of time in order to be very well prepared. And then I traveled by train to Linz. It's about, so door to door, it's a bit more than 2 hours from Vienna.
Mm-hmm.
And then the interview went pretty well. I was really, I don't know, it was a nice atmosphere. I had the feeling I could talk to the jury nicely. Probably my daughter helped. and when I went back, I thought, well, this was a nice day. But I was quite sure that they would not take me, because I was really sure that they wanted somebody more oriented towards research in production and not in logistics.
Oh.
And all my research had been so far in like vehicle routing and logistics related stuff. So I was quite sure that they would take a kind of a strategic decision towards taking somebody from the production field.
Mm-hmm.
But I was wrong. When I was told by the head of the jury that I could call a few days later to ask for the result of the jury, like to get an informal information. And when I called, they told me, now I have to check, you're for Parragh? Yeah, I said yes. Oh, yes, we ranked you on place 1. I was like, oh, okay. Wow. And he told me I should watch out for some contact from the rector of the university to start the negotiations for the position.
Wonderful.
So, this was great.
And there you are in Linz.
Right. And now I'm in Linz. So this is also something that is not so easy to decide. I mean, my husband was working in Vienna, and we were discussing how to organize everything. And since my daughter was so small, when I was supposed to start this position, we decided that it's not the worst idea to move to Linz and to keep it open if we continue to live in Linz, or at some point to move to another place. But at the moment, I think we're really happy here. The children are really happy, and it works.
Yeah. That's one part of the academic life. Sometimes you are pushed to go elsewhere, and even when you already have a family, it can be tricky. I understand, but you seem to have a lot of willpower, resilience, and manage to thrive and be well succeeded in all your endeavors. But I think you took administrative position, more than one actually. So can you talk about that part of your life?
Yes, so yeah, I think it comes a bit with the professor role. It's completely different to being a postdoc where you can spend your time on doing research, so research you like, and then maybe a bit of teaching and maybe support a bit in administrative tasks. Now you're really part of the people who also decide a lot of things. And when I arrived in Linz, so here the organization is a little bit like that every professor has his or her small institute. So you have kind of a lot of power in the sense that you have your own budget, you have to take a lot of decisions. So I have to allow my people to go on holidays. So all this I have to sign and they have to apply for all these things, and I'm responsible for all these things. But in addition, there was some restructuring process going on when I arrived. And this involved that they reorganized the teaching, they reorganized the organization of the entire business and business informatics group, which I belong to. And this came along with the founding of a business school in the sense of a metric structure across all business and business informatics institutes. And we are quite many, so they decided to have kind of divisions where they have subgroups, and from each subgroup, one person should be part of the managing group. And since a colleague of mine who was initially doing that became vice rector for teaching, somebody else had to take on this role, and they asked me to do that because they thought I would be. My institute is basically a business administration institute, but I'm still grouped with the business informatics people because of the operations research orientation. And they thought that I would be also a good bridge to the management people. And I said, yeah, I don't want us not to have a voice in this management team. So I decided, yeah, I will do it. But I did underestimate the amount of work that comes with being in this position. And and the second position I have is this director of the study program, which I really like to do a lot because the production logistics field was not really part of any master's program. So there was a tiny part of the business informatics master program where you could have a specialization in logistics and also have some operations research, but it was not really. There were not many people in this part of the program, so I really was looking for a way of having a master program where people would, in the end, be able to also do a PhD with me and my team. And there I came across the economics people that are really very research-oriented here in Linz, and they are also very quantitatively oriented, and they wanted to refurbish their master program. And so they talked to me, and then I said I could offer an operations research class for this program, and they said, yeah, that would be interesting. It should go into the analytics direction. So we now really have a 6 ECTS module that is operations research. I think it's been a while since there was a module like this here in Linz. And we now have the first people finishing the master program, and I hope I can convince a few of them to also continue their PhD.
Excellent.
In the operations research field.
Yeah, a lot of work. Doing research and teaching, and now doing the administrative part can be tricky, right? It involves a combination of several skills, and I'm sure it's not easy at all. Do you feel you have or you had any disadvantage in your career, especially now that you're more into administrative work, for being a woman?
That's a tricky question. I want to believe I never had any. And I think it's more or less correct. So in general, I think I always had mentors and people really supported me a lot, like Caldona, for example, also Richard Hartl, and also Jean-François Rodot. They tried to, I think they didn't make a difference if I was a woman or not. And they even in Austria, it was a bit also the feeling that when you're a woman and want to stay in academia, maybe this is even a good thing to be a woman because universities are forced to open up to women. And when you're a well-qualified woman, you have good chances of getting a job. what I maybe don't like about this, that this has the side taste that you get a job because you're a woman, and this is something I really hate to hear or think, because I think all the women who have their jobs, they should also be there because they deserve the job, not because they are women. But I think it has so far not been a disadvantage for me. Even like being at the hearing, obviously pregnant at the end of the pregnancy did not do any harm, and the other two on the list were men. So it was apparently the competition was okay. To be honest, I think what I would like to see is that more people do the things that we do, that there are more women doing operations research, because I think they are as talented as the men or the guys. But I think women tend to not overestimate themselves. They tend to underestimate what they can do, and are maybe a bit shyer to think they can do it. And so I think my idea of trying to push this in the correct direction is to encourage female students to try these things. And I think you can also try to make these things a bit more attractive to women, because I know how I feel about these things. And for example, if I know that sustainability is part of all these, or maybe disaster relief applications, like doing good with OR, is something that may be attractive to women in a way, because they want to be caring. And I think if you promote these topics, this can be something that may help to attract more women. Let's see. But I never felt that I had a disadvantage because I'm a woman. What I do feel is, what I experienced is that when you're the only woman in a room, it's harder to be the one speaking. That can happen, but I'm not even sure if men do that on purpose, that they just do not let you talk at some point. Especially, I was quite young, so I was looking young and a woman, so maybe this is something that was maybe not an advantage. But to be honest, I think I've learned to just insist on saying things, and you learn to play the game a bit.
You said that there are some activities that women tend to care more, right?
Yes. So this is maybe something that is not maybe entirely equally distributed. I think that women kind of have this caring gene. I don't know, maybe it's because they're your mother, and I also feel a bit about my group, that this is my second family, and I care for my PhD students, and I want them to succeed and stuff. So I'm not their mom, of course, but of course I want them to be successful and to manage well. And this also has some impact on the administrative part, I think, because if I look at how this is shared among men and women, it's not equally shared, at least not in my group of professors. It tends to be more that there are, in relation to how many women we have more administrative duties. I have a bit the impression, because I think women tend to feel like if it has to be done, just do it, and then it's done. And some guys, not all of them, of course, they tend to wait and see if somebody else is going to take care of it.
I can relate to
that.
that.
I'm not sure if it's really a man and women thing, but a tiny bit, I think.
Sure. I understand. Finally, Sophie, you've been involved in so many things. First of all, you're a mother, have 2 children. You have your research work, and now the administrative work, teaching. And so how do you do it? How do you do to, balance all this?
I think I'm not balancing it that well anymore. I think I could do better. That's also why I'm trying to get rid of some of my administrative burdens, I would say. It was important to do them, but I think it's now time for somebody else to also take care of these things. So I'm trying to remove a bit of the administrative stuff from my list of things to do, and to have more time for research. And it's also not so easy with the family. I think you always feel that you could do more in research and you could do more for the family, and then you always have to kind of find a compromise where you're neither happy with the amount of research you do nor with the amount of time you spend with the family. But in the end, I think it makes it easier to accept that you cannot do everything. So you have to make compromises, and you have to accept these compromises. And I'm trying on the weekend, it's really to spend the time with the family. I do work at nights, sometimes more than I would like to, but I prefer to spend more time during the time when my children are awake with the family, as opposed to working longer and then having the nights free. So I prefer to, if I cannot finish and I know I have to finish this, to wait until my kids are in bed and then do that, and I'm calm and I can do the things and I have spent some time with the family. Maybe it's not the healthiest thing to do, but this is my way of dealing with it.
Okay, Sophie. So thank you very much for sharing all these stories and experiences. I had a great time hearing all of them, and I hope you also had fun being here.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, and it was great to be here. Thanks for organizing this, and thanks for starting the series. I think it is a really great idea.
Yeah, thank you so much. So let's see if we can meet each other in person anytime soon, and who knows, we can even collaborate. Now that I know a little bit more about DARP, then you can I can ask for advice and even profit from your experience on the problem. So, Sophie, once again, thank you so much, and all the best. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Bye.